I am goal-oriented to a fault. A year ago, I set a very lofty goal to work down my yarn stash to only 3 bins by the end of 2025. An admirable goal, perhaps, but deeply misguided, and my entire perspective around stash has completely shifted over the past year. I thought, what if instead of asking myself, how can I work down my yarn stash faster? I asked myself, how can I get the most out of my yarn stash? A simple mental switch, but a big one. And I didn't have an answer to that question. How can I get the most out of my yarn stash? And I still don't have an answer. But I know the answer isn't to use up all my yarn as quickly as possible just so I can buy more. The goal made sense at the time, and I am the type of person that gets very overwhelmed and develops a nearly uncontrollable urge to sell all of my belongings so I can give myself a false sense of control. And at some point, I have to realize that even if I purged all my belongings, I'd still be overwhelmed. I'd just be overwhelmed in an empty room. Now, since this is YouTube and not therapy, I won't dive into my psychological journey into managing overwhelm, especially because that journey is wildly incomplete. But I do want to explore what all this means for my yarn stash, and I'd like to answer some questions for myself. Question number 1. What is the purpose of my yarn stash to me? So far, I've come up with to spark inspiration, also having a sense of convenience, and I know the purpose is not to stress me out, and it's also not an excuse to overconsume in the name of a hobby. So I think the purpose of my yarn stash to me is to provide inspiration and to enable me to actually do my hobby because yarn is a required material to knit. The second question is, how will I know I have too much yarn or too little? To me, I think I'll have too much if it doesn't fit into my bins, which it currently doesn't, and I can't reasonably use the stash amount in 1 to 2 years. To me, my stash is too little if I can't cast on 2 to 4 projects on a whim, because that variety and accessibility is an essential part of my creative process. Question number 3, how does this connect with my values, and specifically my values around knitting? I value healthy consumption that de-incentivizes buying more. I value creative exploration, and I also value simplicity in the home to foster peace of mind. As I've been reflecting on my values, especially as they relate to knitting, I find that they're kind of all over the place, but when I take a step back and look at the bigger picture, what I'm telling myself through these values is that it's time to slow down. I did the exciting, I'm super into knitting, I'm starting a YouTube channel thing, and my choices led me to buy too much. That was all me. No one held my hand with my credit card at the yarn store and forced the woman to slide it, but I am pleased that I've been getting better. It's hard when your values and what you enjoy directly contradict each other. Because if I'm being honest, I love shopping. I love yarn shopping. I love shopping of any kind, really. And it's hard to force myself not to do that because I enjoy it so much. But I do believe that over the course of the next year and the course of the rest of my life, however long that may be, hopefully long, I do believe and trust myself that I will continue getting better. I will continue reflecting on my values and behaving and acting in accordance with them. I think I can have a little grace for not having it all figured out in my 20s. Next week, I plan to release a sister to this video that will go through my entire yarn stash and just give reviews, thoughts, what have I used and really liked and now I don't really like as much anymore and why, what's new and I'm really excited about, what am I completely not enjoying at all. That'll be next week. And I want to say it here that I am a little bit embarrassed by how much yarn when I go through my stash I don't want to use. It's embarrassing. I got so excited to buy a yarn thinking, yes, this is going to be so great. I'm so excited to use it. And I was wrong. That's embarrassing. And in that video, I pull aside a lot of yarn that I plan on donating. So I actually went through my collection and donated a significant part of my yarn stash. And I had so many emotions looking at that pile of yarn that I want to donate, knowing full well I spent money on this, I worked for it, I was excited about it, convinced myself it was worth purchasing, and never ever will I use it. I don't like that feeling. My inner critic has a lot to say on the subject, but the gentler, kinder side of myself is saying, good job. Good job evolving. acknowledging that you were doing something that did not align with your values and redirecting and adjusting moving forward. Good job improving and growing. And 2, good job for finding a good home for this yarn to go to. I have found a good place for me to donate this yarn where I know it will be appreciated and used, and that brings me joy and makes me feel a little bit less like all of it was a waste. It feels very wasteful, but I'm glad I could find a place for it to go where it'll actually be used. So I do really feel like I've been getting a lot more discerning with my yarn purchases moving forward, even though I'm still cluttered with the sins of my younger self. Like, I made mistakes, and the mistakes are physical objects that are present in my home. I'm still prepping the yarn to donate, so they're sitting right in the corner just kind of mocking me a little bit, but I'm feeling good about where I'm at. And just a quick note, in case I have not made it entirely clear, this is all my personal journey that I just happen to be sharing on here. It is not a judgment on people that have larger stashes. It's a very complicated subject with a lot of nuance involved. It's been 12 years of me working through this and growing as a person. 12 years is when I first learned about the concept of overconsumption. I was unaware of this thought as a child and was a little kid that just wanted more all the time. And I continued wanting more all the time, but now I've grown a little bit and realized that just because I want it doesn't mean I get to have it. Editing me here to add in a thought. I've been thinking a lot about a book I read when I was 16. It's called Ishmael by Daniel Quinn. It's my opinion that there are some inherent flaws with some of the philosophies discussed in this book, but I do like the spirit of it. And I do agree with a fair amount of the philosophies described in this book. It is a fiction novel that mostly discusses the philosophical responsibility between humanity and our environment. A large theme in the story is the concept of takers and leavers. A leaver is like a bird. They take only what they need in order to survive, and they leave the rest. A taker is more like me, taking far more than they need, leaving less behind for others. And the way Daniel Quinn phrases it in the book is, the premise of the taker story is the world belongs to man. The premise of the leaver story is man belongs to the world. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I think it's incredibly relevant in terms of my thought process regarding my consumption in general, because this isn't just about yarn, this video. It's my thoughts around consumerism in general and where I'm drawing the line for myself. And for those thinking, gosh, why are Americans so greedy in my country? We don't have this consumerist mindset. Good for you. That's awesome. And here's a couple excerpts from the book, which I think explain the American mindset pretty well. And I'd also recommend a video by Levi Hildebrand where he kind of dives in discussing why Americans are the way they are in terms of greed. Also, America is not entirely special in that way. There are many countries that are like that. We're just really good at it. So I took a couple excerpts from the book and put them together in a way that makes sense and kind of explains. So, there is nothing fundamentally wrong with people. Given a story to enact that puts them in accord with the world, they will live in accord with the world. But given a story to enact that puts them at odds with the world, they will live at odds with the world. Given a story to enact in which they are the lords of the world, they will act like lords of the world. And given a story to enact in which the world is a foe to be conquered, they will conquer it like a foe. And one day, inevitably, their foe will lie bleeding to death at their feet as the world is now. You are captives of a civilizational system that more or less compels you to go on destroying the world in order to live. You are captives, and you have made a captive of the world itself. That's what's at stake here. Your captivity and the captivity of the world. Everyone in your culture knows this. Man was born to turn the world into a paradise, but tragically he was born flawed, and so his paradise has always been spoiled by stupidity, greed, destructiveness, and short-sightedness. We are not destroying the world because we are clumsy. We are destroying the world because we are, in a very literal and deliberate way, at war with it. And just to throw in a less kind of depressing quote from the book, I have amazing news for you. Man is not alone on this planet. He is part of a community upon which he depends absolutely. So this thought about yarn stash size to me is so much deeper and more involved than just yarn stash size. It's not willy-nilly for me to say I have too much yarn and I think I'm consuming too much. There are very real emotions, philosophies, and beliefs that I have that are going into this. And so it's simultaneously something that I would say isn't that deep, but at the same time is exceptionally deep because it doesn't really matter how much yarn I have. If I have one extra skein of yarn than I probably should, the world will not burn to a crisp as a result. But I cannot expect others to participate in reducing our harm to our environment if I am not also behaving in such a way. Well, that's all from editing me. So I'll talk more about my plans and sort of rules I set with myself around yarn stashes at the end of the video. But for now, I just wanted to cover a couple of stats and some data. I guess it's not really stats. That's statistics is a real thing. But it is data. So I'm recording this at the new year of 2026. And a year ago, I cataloged my entire yarn stash just on an Excel spreadsheet, not on Ravelry. I don't see myself ever doing that. I can't be bothered. And at the time, I had an insane amount of yarn to me. I clocked in at 18,422 grams of yarn in total. That is 41 pounds for you imperial people and 19 kilograms for everyone else. That's a lot of yarn. That's too much for me. And I set the goal that I mentioned at the beginning that I wanted to work that down. I didn't set any specific numbers. I just kind of had a visualization in my head that I wanted to make a decent amount of progress working that down. And I talked about how that was a misguided goal, but it was still important. As misguided as the goal is, I still have limited space. I still need to not have as much yarn as I have. And I did use a lot of yarn last year. I have mixed emotions about this. Like, I'm simultaneously proud of like, yay, I actually am using a lot of yarn and not just wasting it. But also being like, wow, I used a lot of yarn. So remembering I had 41 pounds of yarn. A year later, this year, measured again, and I had 34 pounds of yarn. That is a reduction of 7 pounds, which to me weirdly doesn't feel like very much. And when I thought about it, it's because it's not. I used way more than 7 pounds last year. I purchased a lot of yarn at the beginning of the year because I had that goal to use up my entire yarn stash. So if I had 2 skeins of red wool yarn and I decided I wanted to make a sweater out of it, I would purchase 7 more skeins of it in order to make the sweater. And that happened a lot last year. So I did work through a lot of my existing stash, but I had to buy so much yarn in order to do that the way that I was doing it. But even not considering that, it's still good progress to me going from 41 to 34. I would still like that to be lower, but as I've talked about, I'm going to go about it in a different way and not just focus on the results and trying to use up as much yarn in my stash as possible. I want to cut it off at the source and just be buying and consuming less brand new yarn, prioritizing reusing what I have. So I went from 41 pounds of yarn last year to 34 pounds this year. And I measured again after destashing a whole bunch of yarn that's getting donated, and I'm down to 26 pounds. Feels weird to measure yarn in terms of pounds. That is weird. You know what? I'm going to accept the fact that that's super weird because the way I measure it in my head is mostly in terms of volume and how much space it takes up. But I didn't feel like trying to measure the volume of yarn that I have. So I'm at 26 pounds of yarn right now, which is 11,735 grams. And looking at my stash right now and seeing how much space it takes up and the things that I can do with it, I would like for that to be reduced slowly over time simply by using my yarn and just not buying much. And I'm hoping I can get that to be sub 10,000 grams, which would be about 22 pounds. So if I can keep it, in the 20 to 24 pound range, that feels about right for me for the type of knitting that I'm doing. The fact that I am starting to explore my other hobbies as well. And I'm not knitting quite as much as I used to. I'm still going strong and I'm not going to leave knitting behind as a hobby. I enjoy it too much for that, but I am doing other stuff. So with that being accounted for as well, there is no reason for me to own as much yarn as I do. I still have a lot of thinking and a lot of growth to do around yarn stash and my relationship with consuming in general. But here's some thoughts I have, at least right now. First, there is no such thing as a perfect stash. It's something that will always be evolving and something I'll always be learning about. I need to be flexible and forgiving with myself as I learn. That being said, I do like to be a little structured with my approach to buying yarn. My second thought is as I have more money, I'm wondering if I have more responsibility to purchase in alignment with my values. Specifically, my values, not values that have been assigned by others. I would like to slowly transition to buying a higher percentage from independent dyers and seeking secondhand yarn sources. I'd like to continue unraveling my projects and striving to make them good. If I have a sweater that I don't like or don't wear for whatever reason, but the yarn's perfectly fine, I want to get into the habit of unraveling that and reusing the project for something else. Now, right now, I can't afford to buy all high end yarn all the time, but I can do a little bit. It's not all or nothing. And I do have certain limitations that I need to sort of accept. Like, Drops Cotton Merino is the best yarn I've ever tried for my skin because I have really sensitive skin. So I need to figure out the balance that works out best for me. And I also need to remember that none of this is life or death. We have bigger problems in this world than stash size, and better things to do than police others around their stash sizes. I think the best any of us can do is assess what our values are and turn towards them as much as we can. I would like to keep reflecting on the questions I asked myself at the beginning of this video because I think they're good questions that I want to spend more time considering. What is the purpose of a yarn stash? How will I know if I have too much or too little? And how does it connect with my values?